Ryan, what about you?
Blood, my story is the complete opposite, my guy. But I think that when you were speaking, one phrase is coming to my head, and it's like a spiritual principle, and it is, what you behold, you become.
Yeah.
And that's why the Apostle Paul, when he's writing letters to different churches or whatnot, he's constantly saying, fix your eyes on Christ, fix your eyes on Christ. You know what I mean? Fix your mind on things above. And whatever is noble, whatever is, whatever is noteworthy, whatever is kind, think on these things, because what your mind's fixated upon, you're gonna be drawn into, and you're gonna actually become and embody whatever your eyes are fixed upon, the eyes of your mind. And I think that's a massive thing that we need to continue as men. That's something that we need to remind each other of, but it's also something that we need to be teaching our youngers to realize, because some of us, we, from our own experience, are so unconscious to the things we were feeding ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. The eye is consuming a lot more than the mouth ever could. And the things that go into your body can mash you up. So imagine the things that are going into your eyeball, and we are constantly feeding, and we probably more now than ever before, we actually have an opportunity and a responsibility to check the things that we're feeding ourselves.
Yes. Especially during lockdown, you've got idleness creeping in. The media doesn't slow down just because your life has slowed down. It will consume your mind if you're not intentional about what you spend your time on. I had an interview with a guy in this podcast earlier. His name is Leo Flowers. I don't think he's a believer, but he's very accomplished in giving mental health advice. And he had some great practical tips about things to do, like just again communication, like instead of being on your phone all the time, like learn to get your sleep. Like if the amount of time that technology eats up the sleep that we have, and then we wake up and our resolve for the day is ruined because we didn't get enough sleep. We're not energized for the day. Our self-control and our resolve is down because we're not getting the rest that we need. So there are very practical sides to this as well. He also said, if possible, go out every day. Do a walk.
Yeah, man. Walk,
see
bro.
a panoramic
Enjoy
view.
nature.
Yeah. Because
drink water.
And like you said, there's power in the eyes. There's power in what we behold, right? Leo said, every day, if you make at least a bit of time to look at a panoramic view, like you don't have to go on the hills. Like for me, I'm fortunate enough to have a back garden that has a pretty good enough view of the local trees, right? And I just do some skipping and I observe the trees. And that helps broaden my horizons. It teaches my brain that there's more to life than my little bubble. What I've normalized in my brain up until this point in my life is not the big picture. I'm capable of so much more. And these physical things that we do, and like you said, Paul, taking a notebook, writing down reasons to be grateful, doing tangible things to remind yourself about what really matters in life is important. And this applies to everyone. What I love about this podcast is there's so many transferable things that are applicable to anyone of any gender, any race. That deep down, these issues of Black mental health and this and that, it's just issues of the human soul that we all have, which is what keeps us grounded as individuals, and our resolve to do practical things to help us depends on how strong our beliefs are. What was I going to say next? Back to like faith. I was asking in terms of the different mental breakdown moments of your lives, like how quick were you to resort to your faith to help you? And what kind of made it hard for you to say or to understand that Jesus, your relationship with Jesus could be the answer for that? Like, what were the stumbling blocks in your faith at that time?
I personally had a few different deliverance encounters, I'll call them. And for people who don't know what that is, it's almost like what somebody might call an epiphany, or what somebody might call a phenomena of the mind, or a phenomena of the life, where you come to a certain revelation, or it's healing. Really, I experienced many different experiences of healing for my mind, because a lot of the time people talk about mental health issues as if they cannot be dealt with other than through therapy or through narcotics, or what we call pharmaceutical route, or whatever. But taking drugs,
not that therapy is bad.
No, definitely not to say therapy is bad. If you're in therapy, stay down that route, because there's some amazing things that can happen when you stick at that and remain persistent. But for me personally, I didn't have that. But at the same time, I will say that conversation with your loved ones, those who are close by you, if you believe you can trust their counsel, is second to none. Iron sharpens iron in all situations, and just being able to have somebody that you can reason through things with. So I was thankful to have my brothers and to have my family, because there was no conversation that couldn't be had. Oh,
that's good.
I remember it being quite a bombshell when I did share with my family the types of things that I was doing and thinking, and my mental health state. I almost actually got sectioned. So that's my story.
Wow.
But I experienced many different levels of healing. I suppose that it's all a process. Do you know what I mean? I personally had a phenomenal situation where I was one way one day, and the next day I was different. But at the same time, I've realized, even in my older age, I come across things. I'm like, I thought I passed this when I was 18 years old, and that's 10 years ago now. Man, still having to, allow these things to. I'm still having to face them, and overcome them. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, man, and it's something that people are constantly faced with, because we're fragile beings. Although we have a lot of strength, we're very fragile at the same time. And just as much as these practical things can help you find and remain in sanity, my relationship, I don't like to use the word faith, but my relationship with the Most High as my Father, coming to know my identity through the lens of Christ. And a lot of people don't really speak that much about the counseling of the Holy Spirit, actually having the being of Christ inside you to counsel you. And it's one of those things that can make people feel a bit weirded out and a bit scared or a bit strange. But
and especially within the Black community, again, I don't want to reinforce negative stereotypes, but and, a lot of the lack of fathers that we deal with in, many ethnic minority families, especially, unfortunately, I guess, among Black people, I'd say, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems a lot of Caribbean families, especially, seem to have this issue of the father not being present in the home, whether that is due to his, cognitive decision or just through the circumstances that he's gone through. But I guess it's hard when you have a lack of a father figure in your life. You find it hard to understand that God is a loving father, and, we could go down a whole big rabbit hole of how, in an attempt to, hold on to their Black pride, many Black people kind of discard Christianity because just the taste of Christianity is bitter to them because of the whitewashing of it and Western culture and all of that, which we'll need another episode.
I know. Invite me for the episode, please.
I will. I think
down, bro,
definitely. We'll definitely. But, and Paul, if you want to do that as well, you can join us as well.
Definitely. I'd love
to dissect that. Yeah, definitely. So, I guess the question now is, how did, the churches you've been part of, how have they helped you better navigate your identity as not just a man, but as a child of God? And through these hard seasons where you were really going through, I guess, identity crisis, how did the church help you? And from what you've experienced, what do you think the church needs to do more of to help maybe either young men in general or black men, and to help us really navigate our manhood? What do you think the church? What have you liked the church doing? What have you seen the church do well, and what areas of improvement do you think we can have? So I'll let either of you start that one.
Yeah, I think for me personally, the biggest thing we can do is to just, well, okay, there are a few things. I'll start with the kind of the black community as a whole in terms of how we address mental health. I personally, when I was going through what I did through, I as an individual, I'm very much a lone warrior, and I like to keep my situations private. And so I only really like Art said, like RT said, I speak to, my loved ones. But I think, so growing up, I always had a lot of responsibility in the church. And so we do have a lot of counselors, a lot of people to kind of talk to. But I think in general, what I've noticed is a lot of people within the church don't necessarily know how to apply biblical knowledge to therapy in a therapeutic way. And I think, and here's what I mean by that. I mean, therapy by definition is just counseling. You see what I mean? But counseling is a program-based thing, step-by-step thing, right? And I think the Bible is a very good basis. The principles that are taught in there, taking care of oneself, building good habits, etc., building a character. These are things that can be everyday living, and actually work quite a lot and actually quite well with a lot of psychological theory in terms of like CBT, therapy, etc. There's quite a good blend there, and there's a way to mix in biblical principles in a way that is consistent. But what I find counters therapy, a lot of just telling me Bible, that's completely impractical. In that I know the verses, but I need to know what they can do for me. I need to know what that looks like in real life. In how does I'm more than a conqueror? How do I do that every day? How do I pen that down? How do I actively do that? How do I love? How do I? God hasn't given me the spirit of fear, but of power. And the sound mind. How do I apply these things? Power, love, and the sound. How do I really put these things in place? That's pretty much absent. And that lack of applicability is what I think hinders the church, because you find that you go there and you just hit the same verses spat time and time again, but no one knows really how to make it practical, man. And
there's no system that's put in place.
There's no system. There's no program. There's no step-by-step thing. There's nothing like that. And I think part of the reason is because a lot of churches, again, have this stigma that for some reason being more educated will somehow result in you having less faith. The more something can be explained, the less God becomes relevant. It's just this fear. I've noticed it, especially when I engage with people in churches sometimes, and I speak to them about there's a classic example of the reliability of the New Testament. The shroud of Turin, and all these things that are historical. And I try to look at the Bible from a historical perspective, etc. That shakes them up. Don't speak about. Don't do that. It's all the what explanations. It's
and if we keep it within black context as well. Some black people, again, we associate knowledge with a white thing as well. So you've got that added thing as well, where it's you're being a bit too much like the white man in the sense that you're too prideful in your knowledge. We associate education and knowledge with whiteness and power. So you've got that added stigma to being quote unquote, intellectual, within the black churches as well, we've got that added sort of barrier as well in many cases. Obviously it's not within every black church, but many churches, I guess.
I couldn't tell you how many times, not necessarily in church, but growing up in my community, because I always took pride in my eloquence. I love English. I love sounding like I know what I'm talking about. Being able to put sentences together, telling a narrative in the exact same way I picture it in my mind. There's just something so beautiful about that for me. And I love that. But, every time I spoke, I sounded white. And apparently that was a bad thing. And it's like, well, all right.
Thing that
Nonsense.
Fortunately, I like I told you before, I'm pretty stubborn. So I was just like, I don't care what you think. And I continue on. But yeah, it's just, for me, it's just the people in church need to kind of, it's kind of like that project you're talking about, the
animated project I'm working on.
Yeah. And so that particular kind of thing where we need to teach people like the reason behind faith, and that faith and reason are one. Once we can pass that barrier, I think we'll become so much more open to addressing these issues in like for what they are sometimes, like sometimes it's just a matter of developing a plan along with prayer every single day, like an active plan that you actively do. Or else what will happen is you'll take someone into a room and you'll talk to them and you'll give them a Bible verse here and there, and they'll say it, feel good for a moment, go home, and they feel terrible again. And then their conclusion would be that this stuff doesn't work, when it's just that you didn't do it properly. And so they'll go to a therapist now, and the therapist is a secularist, right? The therapist doesn't believe in God, and they'll give them something, a step-by-step thing, and it works. And now all of a sudden, God isn't real. Is that what I mean? Because what you gave them in the name of God wasn't a program or anything that could actually work practically, because it didn't have any order to it. And so they took that to mean that prayer doesn't work, when truthfully that's not necessarily the case. And so it's a lot
basically
like that.
It's basically what I think it was James who said, faith without works is dead, right? Faith is not fully come to life or activated if you don't have your works and your practicality to aid it. And again, there's this misconception within Christianity of faith versus works. You've got some Christians who are like, all faith, just pray about it. And then you have Christians who are too focused on the work aspect. You have to work. So this whole conversation that we're having tonight is about balance. I think that if there's one word to sum up our conversation tonight, is balance. And it's hard to understand and maintain balance if you do not have a balanced worldview. That's what it comes to. Like, if you want to really find healthy balances in your life, it all comes down to having a balanced worldview. And again, that's why we believe what we believe as Christians, because there's so much duality in Christianity. There's God's grace and his justice. They go hand in hand. We've got faith and works. They go hand in hand. We've got, trusting in God. We've got the peace that God gives through Jesus Christ. And we've also got the reality of the spiritual war that we have to fight as well. So that's what I love about Christianity, is there's balance. And what the Bible, how we look at Jesus as well. And Jesus as a man, and how when I look at Jesus as a man and how he lived his life, that helps me as a man to have a good sense of identity. He had a great balance between humility and emotion and sensitivity, and also making it clear who he was and what his authority was. And the amazing thing is, the strongest thing he ever did on the outside was the weakest thing that he did to many people, which was dying on the cross, taking on the sins of the whole world. That for me has become the pinnacle image of manhood. That through your humility, through your brokenness, you are actually being stronger than any other human being, because you're able to face pain. You're able to face humiliation. And it's not even for yourself. It's for those around you. Like, that's what it really means to be a hero. When we look at all these comic books and all these action hero movies, we know just from great films that we've seen from, these great male role models we look up to in popular culture, we know that the best heroes are the ones who lay their lives down. They're the ones who take the fall for the team. It's not the one who's got the shining badge and saying, look at me. That's not the real hero, and, so like, let's just talk a little bit about Jesus and how just Jesus as a man and the historical record of what he did on earth, how that's helped both of you, really understand what it means to be a man. which I know we won't have enough time to fully dissect that now, but let's just touch on it a little bit. Just tease the audience a bit, you know?
I can't even lie to you. Getting to know Christ, I think, really saved me. Like, there's a quote by C.S. Lewis, and I'll probably butcher it, and it says, I believe in God in the way that I believe in the sun. Not only does he give me light, but through him I can see everything else, you know? And that's the way that I view my Christian life. Like, let me tell you something, right? And I'll be totally frank with you. Without God, I am a selfish, vain, lustful individual who basically lives to serve his own pride. And I couldn't see that before. I don't know why, but I couldn't see it. Because as far as I was concerned, it's my desires. You know, I'm justified, But you can't love like that. That's not love, right? And so knowing God and looking at his principles, love does not. I had to realize that like I've got to die in some way. You know, I've got to. Parts of me have to die, and I have to fight them in order to love the people that I love the way that they need to be loved, and beyond the point where I feel as though I'm no longer in a place of convenience. That's where it really came for me. It's I had to move past convenience and simply putting a checklist of the things I wanted. You know, I reached a point where it became more about how do I express love in a way that God would be proud of. Like, is this really what can I make this kind of, is viewing the person this way how God views me? Like, can I really base the value of, let's say, you know, my next relationship on how they look, you know, or whether or not they know me? Is that really what's important? And I think for a lot of guys who are married, etc., and moved on, that's a ridiculous question. But as a guy who's, you know, 23 years old, I hadn't really had much experiences in life. That was a big question for me because kind of like what you said earlier, I spent 22 years of my life feeding myself nonsense, right? And I didn't know I was being fed. I didn't know that I was being vain and being shallow, and I had all these requirements and checkboxes inside my mind that were, you know, just at the back of my head. And then when I was put into a position where I was in real life, I would constantly use it. And then I was put into a position where I had to fight it. And that's why it became so difficult for me, because I looked back and I just saw corpses, right? I saw just dead things in my life that needed to be taken out. Vanity, lustfulness. I told myself I can't expect that the women that I eventually marry will always be as attractive as they were on day one. One day it'll go away. But even if it means that I have to get used to it, am I really going to take away what God has given me or hate what God has given me because of something as shallow as appearance? Is that really all there is to me? Is that Christian? Is that God? Is that how I'm supposed to love? Is there more to me than my desires? Like, all those questions started to come up. And so for me, seeing Jesus and what he did for me, and I'm like, yo, this is a guy who died for me, and I'm all the shallowness that I'm experiencing and trying to get rid of, he died for me and laid his life down for me in spite of that. So who am I to treat anyone else that I love any differently and start to treat them differently because they don't look good today or because they've annoyed me today or whatever? Like, how am I supposed to, how do I reflect God in my life in the way that I think he's reflected himself to me? And that's what Jesus did for me. Like, like, I'm talking 180. I kind of went like, this is not what I thought it was. And that's why at the start I said love is nothing like what you think it is, because it's a laying down. First, it's a laying down and being like, I choose this, I love this, I'm here for this, and I will fight for this, and we will work through this. That's what I think.
It's through the Greek language, agape love, unconditional love, the purest form of love. We're not talking about the love you hear about on Love and Hip Hop, or or we ain't talking about this is a funny time in the world right now. We thought Will and Jada were relationship goals, and look where that got us. Like, beautiful definition of love right there, Paul. Thank you so much for that. Ryan, is there anything you want to add to that?
There's an old Greek word that they use in theology called kenosis, which just kind of encapsulates what Paul was talking about. And the way that they describe it is self-donating. I don't know why, but I really like that angle. It's about the donation of self, in a way of seeing other people propel and making sure that you realize that your life has never been about you. It's self-giving, self-donating love is where you find love. And that's why Jesus said, unless you lose your life, you'll never find it. He's an encapsulation of that, and to know that the designer and creator of the universe, that's the resonance and the frequency in which he created all things. And when we're all out of line with that, when we're not walking in line with that same spirit and same vibe, do you know what I mean? And it's amazing to think that the sun, like he was talking about, or the moon or the stars and everything else that we can see, has been created in and under that same principle. The sun gives us life, and it burns, and it's it's gonna, at some point they say it's gonna implode because of its radiance. But that's all for us to be able to be alive. And nature, a plant gives its life for us to have life. You can continually see throughout. Even, I don't know what you man had for food today, like what you had for lunch and dinner, but I'm going to take it because you're from certain places of the planet. You had some meat in there, innit? You may not have, but at the same time, this animal gave its life in order for you to have life.
It's a circle.
And
it's a cycle.
And that, that picture is everywhere we look when we have eyes open enough to be able to see it. And yeah, man, it's beautiful how it all ties in when the scales fall.
Yeah.
But the scales are things that we gave to ourselves just by being who we are, like Paul was saying, all of the negative things about himself that he is within his flesh. Do you know what I mean? And I'm never going to go down that route with me, brother, because it's peak.
Yeah.
But and marriage will definitely teach you how selfish you are. And I'm sure when I get to the parenthood side, it was even going to get even more peak when I realize how much of a self-obsessed brother I can be. But the beautiful thing is that Christ kind of stands in the gap and says, well, actually, I'm the way that that the Father looks upon you. I am your identity. I get to actually boasting in him, say that I am holy and blameless and righteous, and I am a son, and I can do no wrong in the light and sight of my Father, although that is not my everyday experience. It's something that I'm being drawn into that experience, and more I kind of come into a revelation of that.
Definitely. I'm going to finish with this to all those who are listening. Regardless of your spiritual beliefs, whether you're a black young male listening or you are a white male who wants to help his friends, or you yourself struggle with mental health, or if you're a female, whoever you are, just listen to this, right? We know if you buy a product and there's a malfunction with it, who are you going to trust to fix it? Who are you more likely to trust? Are you more likely to trust a local person who fixes broken phones, or are you going to trust your friend, or are you going to trust the manufacturer of that product? And so the question I just want to pose to you, again, I'm not forcing my views on you, but it's just something for you to think about. If you really want to get to the bottom of not just your mental issues, but just your general life issues, you're going to have to ask yourself the question, who manufactured me? Who's the manufacturer? Who's the manufacturer of my life? And that we're talking about coming back to the manufacturer. People didn't make you. Culture didn't make you. Even you didn't make you. So I'm not saying you have to be religious to counter your mental issues, but it's at least worth considering if you really want to get to the root of your issues, that there might be more to this than the physical. We might, even if there's a possibility in your mind that there's a spiritual side to us, you owe it to yourself to look into faith. You owe it to yourself to explore the deeper questions of how, not just how did I get here, but why am I here? Like, what is fundamentally wrong with my worldview, my soul, if I do have one? Ask yourself the deeper questions. It's not just about going to therapy. It's about speaking to your loved ones. It's about maybe going to church, reading the Bible, you know, looking into things that popular culture isn't telling you to look into. Because we are complex human beings and we need to address more than just our physicality, if that makes sense. If we really want to get to the root of our psychological or emotional issues. So that's what I have to say on that. And I think we're going to stop it there. Do you guys want to just drop your socials, say where people can find you? And if you're open for people to DM you about the topics, then you can just let them know. So just drop your links where people can find you and contact you.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, mainly. I don't really use Twitter. Instagram's kind of my thing. At Special Delivery, we'll just type in Paul the Messenger, 3 different words, you'll find me. Feel free to DM me. I have a podcast called Be a Man. I'm hoping to get Nathan on.
Yes.
And R.T.R.
Yes.
I'm down, bro. I'm down.
We can kind of talk about this stuff further as well, because it's really important to me.
Yeah.
One thing that I will say as my kind of closing statement is step away from whatever you're desperate for, because do whatever you're desperate for, you know, barring it being desperate for God, will make you vulnerable, and vulnerability leads to compromise. So, you know, unless it's a never-ending source of God, if you're desperate for it, just take a step away from it, especially as a man, because you find that a lot of the mistakes we make is because we were desperate. Like, you had to have it before you blew your chances. Yeah. So yeah,
beautiful. What about you, Ryan?
Everyone lock off of social media. It's pagan. It's Nigel. It's Babylon personified. No, if you can, I'm not an advocate for social media at all. I'm on there because the Most High said, Ryan, you have to be on there for your music and whatnot. But if you want to talk about any of the things that were discussed in this, and anything that I or Paul or I'm sure Nath said resonates with you in any way, please feel free to holler at man on at R.T.Hines. That's Hines. And yeah, man, we all got music as well. We got things to, you know, resonate with your heart on a musical level just as much as these words are, because they all of this can be encapsulated so much more in 3 minutes and a track written by Paul the Messenger or Nathan. They get me. So guys, check their music as well, man. It's not for us, it's for you. Yeah. We make this music for you. We make this music for the resonance of heaven and not for our own purposes. So don't think, man, trying to plug it to get money, because that's not the aim.
Yeah, true that. And God willing, maybe we might be able to exchange some musical ideas and make some songs. But we'll see what happens. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you everyone for listening. I don't know, as of the time I'm recording this, I don't know how many parts I'm going to chop this conversation into. It might have to be 3 parts. Who knows, man? It's not my first. Hey, you know what? I've got another podcast, if you guys weren't aware. It's called #Faith Talk. I started it last year. The last episode I released was the end of March this year, right? And Saint CJ, shout out to Saint CJ, my guy Callum. He was my last guest. Bro, we had to split that thing into 4 parts, man. And like each part was like 45 minutes. Cause bro, that boy, he's got an incredible, God has done stuff in his life, man. So all those listening, go check out my other podcast, #Faith Talk, all one word. Like the last 4 episodes on that one with Saint CJ. There's a lot of crossover with what we talked about today, especially in part 1 with CJ talking about his experience of manhood and how his faith helped him navigate that as well. So you can go and check that out as well on that other podcast. Thanks you all for listening, and stay tuned for the next stuff. Peace.
Respect, Nathan, man.
I'm afraid that is the end of the conversation that I had with Paul and Ryan. And speaking of faith, speaking of Christianity, and what the church can do to combat racism and to address racism, there is a book that I would highly recommend you to read, especially if you're a UK Christian, and it is called We Need to Talk About Race, written by Ben Lindsay. Ben Lindsay is the founder of the organisation Power the Fight that does great work in combating racism and helping black people in various ways through various means. And this book is great. I bought it and I've read it, and I'm rereading it because it's got so much great content on practical steps UK church leaders can take and UK church attendees can take as well in dismantling racial ignorance and helping to make racial integration much more of a reality, because it's very easy for churches to talk about diversity and having a face value sort of approach to racial integration, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And he's got great practical questions at the end of each chapter, asking black people, asking white attendees of churches and white church leaders what they can do. And it's got nice prompts, nice questions, and a few diagrams to illustrate points as well. So it's a great book. There's a few other people featured in the book as well that help Ben really unpack the various sort of ethnic minority experiences in UK churches. So it's a great book. I would highly recommend it, and you can check out a link to order the book on Amazon in the description for this episode. So I highly recommend, please buy it through that link. That link is an Amazon affiliates link, which allows me to get a little bit of a commission for every order that is made through that link. So if you could order through there, that would really help me fund my content and take it to the next level. So if you want to support in just a small financial way, then it will be great for you to order the book through the affiliate link that is in the description for this podcast. So wherever you're listening, just look on your screen, look at the written description for this episode, and you will see the link to order that book, We Need to Talk About Race. A great resource for today's UK Christians. So and obviously it's not just for UK Christians. There's loads of transferable things in there that relate to just society in general. So even if you're not Christian, there's still a few things in there that you might find interesting. And if you are a Christian who is not in the UK, there's still a lot of application that it can have to your church life as a believer. So thank you, and I will see you in the next episode where we continue this conversation about black identity and racism, and how Christianity and masculinity as well, and how Christianity can help with those things. So thank you and peace.